there. We've got outfield tiers plus Scott's Atlanta Braves signed Jurickson Profar. We'll break it all down on a Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in polka. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aaron Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Mosuzuka.
Value so high, but ADP so low. Frank loves him some kind of Joe. Now let's get on with the show.
Happy Kokomo Friday and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on January 24th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Today on the show, we are breaking down all the outfield tiers, even the ones that have 19 names in them. I don't know if I should read them. I asked Scott beforehand. He didn't really give me an answer, so I
said I'm not doing your job for you, Frank. That was my answer.
All right, then we're reading 19 names in an outfield tier today. We also got some news. Jurickson Profar to the Atlanta Braves. Scott, how pumped are you?
Reasonably pumped. It was nice to see them actually add something this offseason after losing, Charlie Morton, Jorge Soler, Travis d'Arnaud, AJ Minter, probably somebody else I'm forgetting. And it's like, are we going to try next year? So they got Jurickson Profar. They're making a little bit of an effort there.
Hey, they added Brian De La Cruz.
Yeah, who's not even on like a guaranteed contract. They only have to start Jared Kelenic until Ronald Acuna is ready to go. So that's good. You probably want me to bring this back to fantasy because that's what the people are here for.
Well, we were going to break it down later on in the podcast, Scott.
Oh, you just wanted an initial reaction.
Generally asking if you were pumped about it.
I mean, yes
really
and
want to
no.
talk about it now.
As a fan, I am probably irrationally excited about it. For fantasy baseball purposes, I am trying not to let this change my perspective. Though some details that came out with the news of the signing do kind of change my perspective a little bit. But I guess we'll call that a tease for when we talk about it later.
There you go. Professional broadcaster Scott White. That is a sneak peek for later on when we get to the news and notes. But let's jump right into the outfield tiers. I did want to mention up top, Scott, I noticed that you included util-only players in your outfield tiers, which makes some sense because I don't think you're going to just make tiers for util-only players. There are a good amount of util-only guys that are going to be started in fantasy leagues this year, and you can see them within these tiers.
So I didn't put all of them in here. Actually, Kyle Manzardo, I tiered him with the first baseman, which you may remember bringing him up on that show. And so what I chose to do with the DH only players is I tiered them at the position where they're most likely to gain eligibility no matter what, no matter how unlikely it is, the position where they're most likely to gain it. So most of them are in the outfield, yes.
All right, well, let's get into the outfield tiers, and we will start with the first rounders, and there are a lot of awesome outfielders here. And, of course, Shohei Ohtani, who is up at the top. Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Kyle Tucker, Mookie Betts, Corbin Carroll, Fernando Tatis, Julio Rodriguez, and Yordan Alvarez. Of the top 17 picks in NFBC ADP in January, 8 of those have outfield eligibility. And some big moves this offseason. Juan Soto signed with the Mets, of course. Kyle Tucker traded over to the Cubs. Also, Ohtani underwent a procedure to repair a torn labrum in his left shoulder back in November. He is expected to be ready as a hitter by spring training, but not expected to pitch on opening day. Lots of moving parts with this early tier. First, and we brought this up yesterday, I just want to reiterate, maybe someone's only listening to this podcast for the first time. You guys are good with Ohtani as a top 3 pick this season, despite the surgery, correct?
Oh, yeah. Top 3 easily. I still have him number 1 for Roto and number 2 for points. I've been hedging on that for months since we first learned about the shoulder surgery, and I haven't made the move yet to downgrade him, but dropping him below 3.
I don't see any path. Yeah.
All right. Just wanted to make sure there. Chris, any pause with Soto or Tucker in new places? So Soto, the first year of a mega contract, the biggest in baseball history, on a new team. It doesn't always work out right away. I'm not doubting the talent of either of these players. I think they're both awesome. It's just sometimes weird things happen when awesome players go to new places. Do you have any pause whatsoever for Soto or Kyle Tucker?
I mean, Soto, I think the biggest thing is Citi Field plays very similarly to Petco Park. Big power alleys, not a great weather environment. So we have seen Juan Soto struggle relatively while playing in Petco Park. So I could see a scenario where he only hits 260 with only 35 homers and a bunch of runs and RBI, which is basically what he did in 2023, if I'm remembering correctly. It was about 260.
275, actually.
275, 33 homers?
35.
30. So
he was awesome still. 930 OPS.
Yeah, that's the thing is okay, the downside is he's still a top 25 hitter. I don't really have too much concern about that. Tucker, Chicago's not a great place to hit, but he's such a good hit. This is not an Isaac Paredes situation, right? Where you worry about the park holding him back. I suppose maybe he could lose a few homers, but with the growth that Kyle Tucker has shown as a hitter over the past couple of seasons, especially with the improved plate discipline, that plays anywhere. The Cubs will have a pretty good lineup, not an elite one, but not much worse than Houston. So no, I don't really have much concern there.
And Tucker's playing for a contract too. If you buy into that, I know some people don't, but we have seen in previous years, talented players run more in their contract years. Willie Adames did it last year. Aaron Judge did it a couple of years ago. So just throwing it out there. For those who might have checked out in the second half of the season, fantasy football started up, all that fun stuff. They might be wondering why Corbin Carroll and Julio Rodriguez are included in this first round tier. I will remind you that Corbin Carroll from June on hit 250 with 20 home runs, 26 steals, and an 849 OPS. And Julio Rodriguez, he definitely had a down season. He didn't have this, 3-month bounce back like Carroll did. But over his final 29 games, he hit 349 with 9 home runs, 6 steals, and a 983 OPS. Scott, it sounds like for both of those guys, Corbin Carroll, Julio, you're not worried. You're including them in this first round tier.
Yeah, that's especially true for Corbin Carroll since we actually did see him bounce back. I don't have a way of looking it up easily now that the product is rolled over to 2025, but my recollection is he was a top 25 outfielder from early June on. I'm sorry, a top 5 outfielder, yeah. Corbin Carroll from early June on once things clicked into place for him. And I think if nothing else, his performance during that time put to rest concerns about his shoulder and it impacting his performance. Julio Rodriguez, I think he's the 2023 version is probably closer to what we're going to get than the 2024 version. I do, as I brought up before when we were talking about him, I do think the way we were drafting him in 2023 and last year was kind of presuming that the good version, we would get the good version all season long. Mm-hmm. And I'm not presuming that anymore with him. I think it's been 3 years or 4 years of him getting off to miserable starts and then surging during the middle months down the stretch to kind of redeem his stats. But I don't think we're going to get that surging Julio Rodriguez year round. I don't think the math necessarily supports it.
I will say, I don't know if you guys agree. I think Carroll's the higher floor player. I think Julio's still the higher ceiling player. Because I do think even the good version of Corbin Carroll, there's a lot of batting average risk there that I don't think the good version of Julio Rodriguez has, because the quality of contact for Julio is so much better that even though Corbin Carroll actually does make more contact, I think he's just going to tend to be a lower BABIP guy. Or if he's not a lower BABIP guy, he's going to be a lower power guy. So I think it's going to be tougher for Corbin Carroll to do both of those things. And I think Julio has a better path to being a true 5 category guy.
I think that's fair. I think the skill set could be more well-rounded for someone like Julio, especially the batting average, 273 or higher all 3 years. So that seems pretty safe in his profile. With Carroll, he does have a really high floor just because of the speed. Like you're pretty much betting on 30
lineup
plus steals.
Yeah,
it's
this
great.
is the best offense in baseball last year.
The D-backs had the best, most runs scored in baseball. Yes, they lost Christian Walker. They also brought in Josh Naylor. So not exactly the same player, but Josh Naylor is really good too. We're not going to talk about every single player in this tier. Like I mentioned for the other ones, position previews are coming up where we will, be able to talk about every player more extensively. Let's take our first break. Before we do that, download and follow our shorter podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today Express, if you haven't already. It's usually a condensed version of this podcast, 8 to 10 minutes. We usually go live 20 minutes, sometimes a half an hour, sometimes an hour. I don't know. Sometimes we just hang out and talk, and then we start it up eventually. But if you want to watch that live, we do eventually go live with that here on the YouTube channel. Again, that's Fantasy Baseball Today Express. Let's take our first break. When we return, back into Outfield Tiers right after this.
I feel home when I see the faces that remember my own. When I'm with my friends, I feel home.
Welcome back in. Outfield Tiers, the also elite tier, includes Jarren Duran, Jackson Chourio, Jackson Merrill, Ronald Acuna, and Jazz Chisholm. Power and speed in this tier. We got breakout seasons from Duran, Chourio, Merrill, and Jazz last year. We know Acuna has massive upside, but is returning from another torn ACL. He has torn the ACL in both of his knees now, and sounds like he will not be ready for opening day. Based on January ADP, one of these names is being elevated above the rest, and that is Jackson Chourio with an ADP of 17.3. Basically the same ADP as Yordan Alvarez. He's going 5 picks ahead of Duran, 7 ahead of Jazz, 9 picks ahead of Merrill, and 13 picks ahead of Ronald Acuna. Scott, what do you think about that price tag, that current price tag on Jackson Chourio?
I think it reflects an outdated drafting model that people need to adjust. It's overemphasizing stolen bases, and there's no need to do that anymore. They're plentiful. They're available at all stages of the draft. You don't have to elevate the base stealers in the early rounds beyond the non-base stealers just because you're afraid they're all going to run out. Now, Jackson Chourio could certainly end up living up to that if he's exactly who he was from June 1st on last year. If we do the same thing we've been doing with Julio Rodriguez for his entire career and just assume, okay, he was this for the final 4 months, so he's going to be that for 6 months next year.
Or Corbin Carroll just now.
Yeah, well, I mean, Corbin Carroll has done it for a full year.
Yeah, he had the
before.
rookie season, yeah.
But yeah, if we do that with Jackson Chourio, or if he just, he's so young, he's entering into his age 21 season, right? Like if he just takes a step forward developmentally, there's certainly a path for him to produce like a first rounder. And I hate instances like this where the trendy, exciting player just gets pushed beyond a point where I'm willing to go. And so then I have to say all the negative things about him because Jackson Chourio, definitely someone to get excited about, but to put him to draft him ahead of tried and true, consistently performing first rounders just seems like an unnecessary risk. And as I've said before, I don't think whatever advantage Jackson Chourio has over Jackson Merrill, I don't think it's big enough that they need to go as far apart as they are. So I have them tiered together, and I'm much more likely to draft Merrill.
The one thing I would say about Chourio is he might be a 300 hitter. Like he has, that's what he did from June 1st on or June 3rd on. I think technically you have to fudge it just a little bit to get him over there, but he has the quality of contact skills, the contact quantity skills as well to be a legitimate help in batting average in a way that you often have to sacrifice. Like speed, we talk about it a ton. Speed is plentiful throughout the draft. it almost always comes with a sacrifice, either power or batting average, often both later in the draft. Jackson Chourio is a guy who legitimately could steal 40 bases and hit 300 and hit 25 to 30 homers. That's where I think you can start to get really, really excited about him. But I mostly agree that like the gap between him and Jackson Merrill probably shouldn't be as big as it is. And I wrote a 2026 first rounders piece for the FBT newsletter that came out on Thursday morning, and both
that was cool. I read it. I liked it.
Thank you. Both Jackson Chourio and Jackson Merrill were on there. I think you can make a case that Jackson Merrill, just as a pure hitter, is ahead of Jackson Chourio right now.
Yeah, I make that case every time we talk about the two of them.
The problem is the plate discipline. He makes a lot of contact. He also just swings at a lot of bad pitches, and it's a testament to his skill that he's able to hit as well as he does. He doesn't walk much, and he was an okay base stealer last year, but doesn't have the athletic ability that Jackson Chourio does. So I think it's a little easier to dream on Jackson Chourio, and because Merrill's a lefty and because he's such a free swinger, I could see a step back, but like I think you can also see a Christian Yelich type outcome very quickly for Jackson Merrill if he pushes towards 25 steals and improves the swing decisions a little more. There's a ton to like with both of these guys.
The NFBC ADP for Jackson Merrill in January is 26.1. And I think he's quickly becoming just my third round strategy, him or one of the third basemen, Austin Riley, Devers, Manny Machado. I think any of those three plus Jackson Merrill, I would be happy to have any of them in the third round. And I feel really good about all of them. So yeah, really, really warming up to Jackson Merrill here at his cost. Did just want to, again, touch on Acuna real quick. His ADP in the month is 30.5, and it's very fluid. We just don't really know right now. Scott has Acuna 28th overall. I have him 24th. Chris, you have him 21st. If Acuna plays in the spring, maybe it sounds like he'll miss the first 2 weeks, maybe the first month. You know, the ADP could maybe creep up a little bit. If it turns out he's going to miss 6 weeks, the first 2 months of the season, then this ADP could drop. So it's just a very fluid situation right now regarding Ronald Acuna.
And on that note, as part of the Profar signing today, the Athletic, David O'Brien and Dennis Lynn, I think that's the Padres and Braves, or Braves and Padres respectively, beat writers for them. They did note that Ronald Acuna Jr. is expected to miss the first month or so of the season while recovering from ACL surgery on his left knee. And the Braves are expected to be more cautious with his workload in the first year back from surgery than they were in 2022, when he struggled at times with inflammation and uncertainty after his right ACL surgery. This is left ACL. So, you know, we've talked a lot about the timetable and how much slower it is. It does sound like they are being significantly more cautious. I still think that there's a chance he beats that timetable, but it's starting to look more and more like Ronald Acuna is going to certainly miss some time. So I'm moving him down a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he's going to miss time and now they're talking about being more cautious, what does that mean? Him sitting out once a week, maybe twice a week? I don't think we really know. So
yeah,
I just
throw it's intentionally vague.
Yeah.
Because I imagine it'll have to do with how he's feeling. He played through a lot of pain that first year back from the first torn ACL, which is why his numbers suffered so much, particularly in the power department.
And how does he look this time too, right? Like,
yeah.
You know,
he's struggling.
They are, as Chris said, they're building in more time this time. So he'll basically have rested and rehabbed a month longer when he returns from this ACL surgery than the last one.
All right, let's talk about the near elite tier, and that includes Kyle Schwarber and Marcell Ozuna. Both of those are util only. We're not expecting them to get outfield eligibility this upcoming season, but we had to mention them somewhere, so they are here. James Wood and Christian Yelich, who is one tier lower in a categories league. Schwarber and Ozuna, well-established sluggers. Wood was one of the top prospects in baseball. He has a ton of upside, and Yelich was great when he played last season, but he ended the year on the IL. He had back surgery, and he should be ready for spring training. The January ADP ranges rounds 5 through 9, with James Wood on the high end and Christian Yelich towards the bottom at 107 ADP. It sounds like NFBC players are playing it cautious with Yelich because there are no IL spots, and that's typically how things go over there. Scott, why did you choose to put James Wood in this tier ahead of names like O'Neal Cruz and Wyatt Langford, who are in the next tier?
Well, I think O'Neal Cruz is pretty straightforward. He's gotten the benefit of the doubt in the past and has fallen short of our grand hopes enough times that I'm giving him less benefit of the doubt this time that he's going to live up to his potential. We haven't seen much improvement with the strikeout rate, for instance. Wyatt Langford is harder to say. I know they're being drafted similarly. I haven't been inclined to draft them similarly myself. But I'm open to it because I'm struggling to explain why. I think this goes back to presumptions I made in October that, James Wood, obviously he had a good showing as a rookie. There was a lot of enthusiasm for him. He's going to be that guy that gets all the helium on draft day, so I better put him here. Wyatt Langford, he let everybody down last year. I know he had a strong finish, but everybody's going to be gun shy after investing so much in him last year, so he's going to go here. And it turns out that's not the case. I mean, Wood, there's plenty of enthusiasm for him, but there's still just as much enthusiasm for Langford. So that may be something I have to look at again.
Yeah. The ADP in January, just wanted to quickly mention Wyatt Langford 45.3, James Wood 51.3. So Wyatt Langford actually moving ahead of him. Go ahead, Chris.
I do want to point out with regards to James Wood and O'Neal Cruz that if you give them the same number of games, so James Wood pace out to 146 games, keep O'Neal Cruz's numbers the same. Cruz had 4 more home runs and 4 fewer steals. It would have been 14 fewer caught stealing for O'Neal Cruz because he was only caught once. James Wood was caught 8 times on 22 attempts. James Wood struck out more often, batting average basically identical. RBI numbers right on, runs a little in Wood's favor. He's going to be a better OBP guy based on what he did as a rookie. But based on what Wood did as a rookie, he was basically just O'Neal Cruz. Now, O'Neal Cruz is 25 or 26, maybe.
O'Neal Cruz is old news, Chris.
Well, yeah, a little bit. Yeah, and James Wood we expect to be ascending.
Right.
But as O'Neal Cruz shows us, it's not always that simple. And James Wood has a lot of the same flaws as O'Neal Cruz and a very similar physical build. James Wood's a little beefier, but they're both 6'7", right?
I wouldn't even call James Wood beefy. He looks kind of frail. I mean, who am I to say? But
frail.
He's got a weird.
He's kind of skinny. Like I don't.
Frail seems like a bad word choice.
Because
frail was not the right word.
There's a part of him that looks like a slightly leaner Josh Bell, but he's got like a similar body shape to Josh Bell, where he's obviously super athletic, but it's weird. Anyway, I view them very similarly. I actually do have Cruz a little bit ahead of Wood, and I have Wood closer to Langford. But I think it's fine.
I'm applying more projection to Wood than Cruz, and that's hard to quantify.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like he was more highly regarded coming up through the minors. He impressed more immediately than O'Neal Cruz did. He's at this point 4 years younger than Cruz, as you said, and he just hasn't had as many missteps along the way as Cruz. And Cruz is nearing like the prime years. He should be a finished product now, and he feels like he isn't.
And I will say with James Wood, not at all optimized. His swing is kind of a mess, or at least it was last year.
Puts way too many on the ground. Yeah,
puts way too many on the home runs.
Ground.
He was late on a lot. Like he was hitting the ball all over the field, and not in a way that felt intentional.
1, 2, 3, 4,
and yet he was still
7 of his
almost 20 and 25 pace.
7 of his 9 home runs were to the opposite field.
Yeah, he didn't elevate a ball to the pull side until like his 40th game or something.
That's a testament to his power too. I mean, the
Yeah.
fact that he could just go the other way and mash home runs like that too. But you're right. I mean, James Wood's swing is not optimized for power yet. If he does make slight tweaks, I mean, he could hit 30 home runs as soon as this upcoming season.
Oh, absolutely.
Obviously, no one would
Could hit 40.
No one would be surprised by that. Two things. Obviously, me saying O'Neal Cruz is old news. I was just being facetious. He's still young enough where he can improve. I do worry about the strikeouts and struggles against lefties in his career. And I do give permission to James Wood and all Nationals fans out there to roast me in the comments and tweet at me because, like, who am I to talk about frailness? Like, look at these guys. What's going on here? So, yeah, that was definitely a misspeak on my part. Did want to bring up the util only guys here because, I mean, we talked about them earlier in the offseason, Chris, but again, people are kind of flocking back in. Football's over. Everyone's getting excited about baseball, spring training coming soon. What do we think about the price tag on the util only guys? The ADP in January, Ozuna 66, Brent Rooker at right around pick 70, and Schwarber at 70.5. It's so funny because as soon as you see one of these guys go, you know the other two are about to go. It's just like, oh, crap, it's time to take the util only guys.
And that's how I rank it, except I have it Ozuna at 51, Rooker at 56, Schwarber at 57. So I'm just higher. I think I'm higher on Yordan Alvarez as well, though he's not util only. Who's the other? Otani. There's one more, right? A little lower.
A lot lower. There's Stanton, Yoshida, and
no, just those three then. I think they're all. I'll gladly take them, and a big part of it, and we've mentioned this many times before. So for those of you who aren't tuning in, who have been tuning in across, going to say something we've said a million times this offseason already, but at least a third of your standard 12-team league are going to be using a util only player every week, at least. That's not counting Giancarlo Stanton, who probably should be started at least when he's healthy. And so I don't know. I think they're being downgraded a bit too much. Like, if you're willing to take Shohei Ohtani, like, I get it. It is frustrating to have your util spot filled in the 5th round. And then you get to a point in your draft where, oh man, the best player is a shortstop and I've already got a shortstop and a middle infielder. Like, I get that. That's frustrating. Your lineup's going to change. Guys are going to get hurt. A lot of guys are going to get hurt in the first month of the season. So, like, you have to keep in mind that your opening day lineup, your draft lineup is not the lineup you're going to play throughout the season. And specifically with Brent Rooker, I think it's worth noting. He had a forearm injury last year that kept him from playing the outfield. I think the last time he played the outfield was like mid-May. But he had, I think, 9 or 10 appearances in the outfield in that first like month or so of the season. So he had that surgery. They've already said they expect him to play more outfield this season. I think Brent Rooker is very likely to have outfield eligibility by the end of April. He's just got to play 20% of their first month games in the outfield. He might do that in 2 weeks.
Even if it's not April, I think sometime in May. But yeah, it should happen.
The other side of the coin with your lineup's going to change is your lineup could change in a way that, oh, you picked up this first baseman who's now must start and you have no place to play him.
Sure.
The utility spot is clogged by a must start player. And so it just hamstrings you all season long.
Sure.
That doesn't change the overall point. I mean, the util only or DH only players have been being undervalued since the days of David Ortiz. So, like, this is something we go through every year with who happens to qualify there. It's interesting in our mock drafts consistently. These values are not happening.
No.
Well, that's because of us.
Yeah.
We keep taking.
Well, I haven't. I'd like to, but I never get a chance because somebody else always does. Like they usually go in quick succession, those 3.
Yeah.
And it's round 4 or 5 usually. So the people we get to draft with us do not buy into downgrading the DH only guys.
Yeah, I will just point out with Schwarber, because in our head-to-head points mock the other day, I took him in the 4th round because he is truly elite in that format. The batting average should be lower, but he walks so much. He's a leadoff hitter, so he gets extra plate appearances. He's going to score a ton of runs, hit a lot of home runs. And also wanted to mention just all three of these guys finished as top 21 overall players in Roto last season. And they're going in the 60s. So
yeah, that's the thing is they're already discounted.
yeah. And look, we're not expecting them to, I guess, be nearly like, they're not going to be as good, I don't think, as last year, but can they be
The most bankable of them
40,
is Schwarber.
top 40, top 50 players, and you're getting them in the 60s? Yeah, I feel pretty good about that. So my draft strategy, Jackson Merrill in the 3rd round, util only in the 4th or 5th, if I could pull that off. There you go. It's coming together. The next best things tier, buckle up. We have 19 names. Scott has pressured me, so I'm going to read all of them. And starting with O'Neal Cruz, Teoscar Hernandez, Brent Rooker, who is util only, could gain outfield eligibility early next season. Michael Harris, Wyatt Langford, Anthony Santander, Mike Trout, Luis Robert, Lawrence Butler, Brian Reynolds, Seiya Suzuki, Riley Green, Cody Bellinger, Brenton Doyle, Spencer Steer, Randy Arozarena, Brendan Nimmo, Dylan Cruz, and Ian Happ. There you have it.
All right, everyone at home, say those names again. There will be a quiz.
Yes. Yeah, someone in the comments yesterday asked, why don't we put up a graphic? I agree. I mean, it would be a nice thing to do. But what you see is what you get on this
Frank, why don't you do more work?
I mean, I guess I could do more work, but it's, the three of us here are producing this podcast.
Just share your screen and scroll through the rundown.
That might not be the worst idea, I guess.
I think it's a pretty bad idea.
All right, I'm not going to do it. All right, well, let's talk about this tier. Doyle and Dylan Cruz are one tier lower in head-to-head points leagues, and there are, look, with any sample of 19 names, there are many different shapes, sizes, skill sets, and experience levels in this tier. I will quickly address some offseason stuff that happened. Teoscar Hernandez back to the Dodgers. Brent Rooker had surgery to clean up a forearm extensor injury, expected to be fully healthy for spring training. Also, Rooker and Lawrence Butler and the rest of the A's will be playing their home games in a minor league ballpark in Sacramento. Santander signed with the Blue Jays, and Cody Bellinger was traded over to the Yankees. Scott, why is this tier so big?
That's the way the position breaks down, Frank. The last tier was teeny tiny. There's kind of a gap between the elites at the position and these players who are all, I expect to be quality starters, but I don't expect them to put up elite numbers. Some of them, of course, have the potential to. If O'Neal Cruz finally breaks through, if Michael Harris stays healthy and maybe creeps up the lineup in a more permanent way, Wyatt Langford follows through on that big September, if Mike Trout is healthy miraculously, if Luis Robert can overcome everything that plagued him last year, then they could end up rising above this tier, but they all have downside concerns too that puts them here. And so that's why they end up getting tiered with the very steady, limited ceiling, but very high floor types like Brian Reynolds and
Brandon Nimmo.
Brandon Nimmo. Yeah.
Spencer
Ian Happ.
Steer.
Yeah. Of the names you just mentioned, the one whose stock improved the most this offseason, in fact, this is the only reason he's in this tier, is Cody Bellinger.
Yes.
Though you're more likely to draft him at first base. Yankee Stadium is the most optimal place he could have gone. If there's any venue that can salvage a left-handed slugger with diminishing exit velocities, it's that one. And so that's why I feel like Bellinger gets tiered higher because of it. But again, you're probably drafting him to play first base.
Chris, ideally, the names in this tier, we'll point out the ADP range is rounds 4 through 12. O'Neal Cruz on the high end and Dylan Cruz at the bottom down at pick 135. Ideally, you want these as your outfield 2, outfield 3, or are you okay if you wait until the 4th or 5th round, one of these guys being your outfield 1?
The way my drafts are going, it's almost never going to be the case that any of these guys are my outfield 1.
You like outfielders, huh?
I think it's more likely they'll be my outfield 3 or 4.
It's hard to draft. I mixed up the words in my head just then. It's hard to avoid drafting an outfielder in the first 2 rounds. You almost have to try to do that. 8
of the first 17 picks in ADP, I heard, are outfielders. Yeah. So got a 50-50 chance of getting at least one. And honestly, I think I took 2 in the points league mock draft that we just did. And it's tough, especially in a league where you only have 3 outfield spots, because then it's like, well, I don't want to fill that 3rd one too quickly. But it's also like, Yeah, but if you get Fernando Tatis and Yordan Alvarez at the end of the first round, it's like, well, I don't really care that I filled my 2 outfield spots because I got awesome players. So, it all depends. But yes, it is hard to see an outcome where any of these guys are my number 1 outfielder this season, and it's more likely they're a 3rd or 4th.
Mm-hmm. Scott, give me your favorite to target and most likely to fade from these 19 names.
Well, the whole idea of tiers is that my favorite to target is the last one left. But putting that aside, I really like Lawrence Butler. He's going to be the headliner of my Breakouts 1.0 coming out. And his cost is kind of in the middle of this group where I rank him. But he's at the end of the more upsidey types at the top of the tier.
He might be like 3rd or 4th in price among this group now. He's up to like 65 in January.
65 in January. Yep.
Yeah,
So
it's
the only ones ahead of him are Cruz, Langford, Teoscar Hernandez, it looks like.
Yeah.
So I have him more like 75 to put it into context. And it's still totally believable that you could get him at 75.
Yep.
But yeah, he's so maybe not necessarily from a value standpoint, but just from I'm excited to see what comes next from him, because he was just a total stud from July on last year, cut way down on the strikeouts, and was a monster at everything. And yeah, I think there's potentially a very high ceiling there for Butler.
Chris, just give me some names, favorites to target from this tier, and maybe one that you're most likely to fade.
I'm not going to draft Lawrence Butler with a top 65 pick, and I'm going to guess his price is only going to continue to increase.
Oof. If he pops a few home runs in spring training, it's
I mean, nothing has happened this offseason, and he's gone from being around 77 in November drafts to 65.
Projections came out.
And you know what's going to happen, Chris?
Honestly,
you're going to start.
It was one projection system came out, and because like there are a couple other projection systems. Like I think ATC came out this week.
Yes.
We're gonna have
shout out to Ariel Cohen.
I think he's like 92nd in the ATC projections. And like, look, it's not to say that ATC's better than Steam. Like whatever. It's
new
just
projections are going to come out. You're going to start making this case against Butler, and Butler's going to start to slide down.
I hope so, because I would love to. Like, he was in my first round contenders piece. Like, I can clearly see 30-30 upside, and a guy who hit, what was it, 295 from July 1st on last year?
I think it was higher than that.
Yeah, it might have been over 300. Like, I can see it. I can't see it with a 5th round pick, which is what it might cost. So
yeah, I wouldn't do it in the 5th round.
That's the one I'm avoiding. I think Dylan Cruz is going to be really good. I don't know if that's a hot take anymore. It feels like people aren't as excited as they should be. He was not good last year, and his professional production has been a little underwhelming. But the process stuff is unilaterally excellent. He has really good swing decisions. He makes a lot of contact. He's a borderline elite athlete, and he just has to make small improvements, tap into the raw power that we know is there a little bit more. And I think Dylan Cruz is one of those guys who could absolutely be a top 25 pick this time next year.
So to give the exact numbers for Lawrence Butler, July 1st on 73 games, he hit 302, 20 homers, 14 steals, a 943 OPS, and his strikeout rate during that time, I think it was just a little over 20%. So that's that. If you want another name, the guy who's most likely to be the last drafted from this tier, and so I'm going to get him very often, it's Brandon Nimmo, who's in my Sleepers 1.0. He has twice over now shown he's a 20 homer guy. He added steals to the mix last year. His batting average plummeted, and I assume that's why he's getting passed over, but it's an outlier for his career, and there's not really a great explanation for it other than just health stuff. So I think his batting average, Nimmo, is going to bounce back in a big way, and he's going to be a 5-category guy for the first time.
For me, I think I'm going back to the Seiya Suzuki well once again. He hit 283, 21 home runs, 16 steals, 848 OPS in 132 games last season. If he could just avoid that one IL trip with the oblique injury, he's done that the past couple of years. If we get a full season, 25 plus homers, 15 to 20 steals, good batting average, 850-ish OPS. Started running more last year. So yeah, I'm a fan of Seiya Suzuki in that, round 8 to 10 range as usually my outfielder too. And O'Neal Cruz in the 4th round. I just don't love the cost. He absolutely can make me look foolish this season, but I still, worry about the strikeouts and struggles against lefties. And Mike Trout, I look, this is the cheapest you've ever been able to get him. His ADP is 125. I understand that. It's just has not been able to be healthy.
Here's the thing.
Meniscus surgeries last season. I can't trust it.
Mike Trout has, I think, like 6 seasons left on his contract.
Jeez.
He's going to play a full season, or like 145 games in one of them. Right? Like that's a 17% chance.
I don't know.
We do think of every guy who can't stay healthy eventually does. Like Ketel Marte has played, I think, 140 games 3 straight years. That was the big knock on him. He can't stay healthy. Giancarlo Stanton played like 157 games 2 years in a row. At one point, it was a while ago now, but there is going to be a point where Mike Trout stays healthy for long enough to be a massive, massive win at his price. Because I don't think, do you guys have any doubt that he's still probably not a 1st round caliber player, although he did start stealing bases again last year. Like I don't have any doubt that a healthy Mike Trout is one of the 25 best players in fantasy still.
It's probably a pick I'll be thrilled to make in a 12-team points league where only 250 players are drafted and the waiver wire is ample. But then in a 15-team roto league, 5 outfielders, 450 players being drafted or whatever it is, not much of a waiver wire to speak of. I'd rather not take the chance.
Agree.
All right, let's take our final break. When we return, we'll hit some news and then back into the outfield tiers right after this.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more. It's Gareth Bale! Wonderful goal! On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Welcome back in news and notes. All right, Scott, your Braves are on the board. We mentioned it. They're signing Jurickson Profar to a 3-year, $42 million deal. Profar is coming off a career year where he hit 280, 24 home runs, 10 steals, and 839 OPS. He finished 36th overall in Roto. He averaged 3.2 fantasy points per game. That was tied for 10th among outfielders. The big question here, can he come anywhere close to this mid-career breakout? Scott, what do you think about that? And anything else that you were teasing earlier?
Yeah, so I've given my take a few times. We might have more people here now, but I don't want to draft Jurickson Profar, but the total the dismissiveness of his breakthrough season is so complete. People drafting him almost as if it never even happened outside of the top 200.
It's the opposite of Lawrence Butler.
It is the opposite of Lawrence Butler. And it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll be the guy that gambles on him coming 80% of the way there, because the price is just so ridiculously low. And I wrote about him in Sleepers 1.0. It seemed ridiculous to have to call him a sleeper after he had just by far the best season of his 11-year career. But the cost is so low. People are sleeping on his potential, clearly. What I said in there is that there's really been no explanation for why he improved so much. The underlying numbers back it up, but there's really been no explanation what changed. And I meant that sincerely. I Googled it to death and couldn't find any explanation. But explanations have come out with this signing. About him working with Fernando Tatis Sr. to tweak his swing. He, among changes he made, he added a leg kick to his swing. And basically he was able to increase his exit velocity 4.5 miles per hour. This tweet from Robert Orr, who writes for Baseball Prospectus. Profar is fascinating because he basically Xeroxed his entire batted ball spread and plate discipline profile from the previous 3 years. He just added 4.5 miles per hour to everything. Turns out that made a pretty big difference. And that sums it up. And now we have this explanation. Apparently, Fernando Tatis also worked with Ronald Acuna before his MVP season. And remember, we saw the drastic reduction in strikeouts from him that year. So he seems to have a reputation here for helping maximize hitter outcomes. And if it sticks with Profar, it's just that little bit of something to make me say, okay, maybe this is sustainable. Obviously, the Braves were willing to buy in for 3 years, $42 million.
Not a small
commitment. They didn't have an overloaded 1-year deal, which they could have done.
I could have seen like a 1 year 17 and been like, ooh, okay, we're not sure on this one. Yeah.
Right. So we'll see. We'll see now that he's signed how much his ADP moves up. I imagine it'll move up some. But I originally ranked him in like the 125 range, and I don't think it'll climb that much. So I think I'll still consider Profar a value pick despite the obvious concerns about sustainability.
Yeah, I've got him right around 150. I'm totally fine drafting him basically anywhere, even though, like you said, I'm very skeptical of what he did, but he was a top 10 outfielder last year.
Yep.
Yeah. I am interested to see how much he rises because we know there's usually a bump whenever a player signs. And this is a good landing spot for Jurickson Profar. If the Braves lineup gets healthy with Ronald Acuna, I mean, even without Acuna, it's still a really, really good lineup. So the counting stats should be there. It's a better ballpark to hit in. Everything is there. I think he's going to move up. How far does he move up? In February, I think he'll probably get closer to that 150 range. But even that, I think if you guys, keep him where you have him in the rankings, you'll have a good chance of getting Jurickson Profar this upcoming season. As for the Padres, they lose out on Profar, and they're kind of short on depth. If you look at roster resource, their current starting left fielder is somebody named Tirso Ornelas, and their DH is Eggy Rosario, who's someone we've heard about for years. Big minor league numbers, but it hasn't really come to fruition in the majors. Do either of those names matter in the deepest of leagues? Tirso Ornelas and Eggy Rosario.
I mean, look, this time last year we were having the exact same conversations about the Padres' lack of talent in the outfield, and then Profar had a career year, and Jackson Merrill nearly won Rookie of the Year despite Paul Skeens having a historic season. So, we can't predict everything that's going to happen, but I don't see a Jackson Merrill here. So I would guess they still need to go add someone, but there's some weird stuff going on with the ownership group that may be hamstringing them this offseason. So
they could trade Dylan Cease. I think if they trade Cease, they're probably looking for major league talent.
I would guess
probably an outfielder. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, I have faith in blanking on the GM's name, or Pobo, whatever.
Preller? AJ Preller.
AJ Preller. People make jokes about how he just keeps throwing away prospects to buy major league talent, but I kind of think it's working for them, and he's managed to make it pretty sustainable. So they'll figure something out. They will not go into the season with those two massive holes, maybe one massive hole. But there's an opportunity here for someone.
Yeah. I have seen a couple of people float a Robert Suarez for, say, a Suzuki trade out there. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it kind of makes sense for both sides. I don't know if the Cubs would actually accept that trade, but something like that. Trading away a Robert Suarez for an outfield ready player, something like that, I think makes sense. Let's try and move quickly through the rest of this news. We're getting conflicting reports on Pete Alonso. Some say the Blue Jays are, quote, deep in contract talks with the Polar Bear, and then others are saying, that they aren't. So believe what you want. As soon as Pete Alonso signs, we'll be here to break it down. Apparently, the Astros have restarted negotiations with Alex Bregman, which doesn't seem to make too much sense. If they were to bring him back, it sounds like Bregman would play third, Isaac Paredes would play second, and Jose Altuve would try to play left field, something he's never done.
That is a wild scenario.
This is a team with a pretty bad outfield right now. Their outfield starters, according to Roster Resource, Chas McCormick, Taylor Trammell, and Jake Myers. That's a pretty rough outfield and bottom third of a lineup for a supposed contender.
Yeah. Big Bob Nightingale reported that the Cubs are on the verge of acquiring Ryan Presley from the Astros. That was shot down by Astros beat writers because Presley has a no trade clause. It still might happen, but it hasn't happened yet. So we shall see. If he goes there, I presume Ryan Presley would probably be the favorite for saves for the Cubs. Spencer Strider has completed 4 bullpen sessions and is on track to have a mostly normal spring training as he returns from internal brace surgery. The Braves also reiterated Strider will not be on the opening day roster. Dodgers GM Brandon Gomes said the Dodgers will still manage their late game bullpen based on matchups. No surprise. But the team is expecting Tanner Scott to have, quote, a lot of opportunities to close games. And of course, that's before any Kirby Yates announcement, which we're still waiting on. We don't know if that's happening either.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty messy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens with Yates. Right now, I would presume Scott is the first one to target, but I would not make a heavy investment in him personally.
Sticking with the closer market, the Tigers are apparently looking for a closer themselves. I read an article that mentioned Carlos Estevez, Kenley Jansen, Kyle Finnegan, Craig Kimbrell, and David Robertson as possible.
There are a lot of
good relievers,
experienced closers still on the market.
A couple of Hall of Famers still out there.
It's true. The Reds apparently are also interested in Carlos Estevez. Just give me a name here. If Estevez signed with the Reds, who do you think would close him or Alexis Diaz?
Man, that's the Spider-Man meme of closers I don't trust. So I don't think either of them would have a strong hold on the job either way. I would not be excited to draft either.
Andrew Friedman said the Dodgers plan to use Roki Sasaki in their major league rotation from the beginning of the season. Scott has Sasaki ranked SP 39. I have him at SP 37, and Chris has him at SP 34.
I'm the Roki Sasaki guy.
Why do you love Roki Sasaki?
How did this happen? He is 20th in January ADP at the NFBC, by the way. I don't know if that's changed at all since he signed, but that's way too high.
I became more pessimistic when he signed with the Dodgers. You weren't on the emergency pod, but they're going to limit his innings so hard.
Yep. White Sox GM Chris Getz said Thursday that he expects Colson Montgomery to be the team's shortstop at some point this season. He also said Montgomery will get a lot of opportunities in spring training. Montgomery's prospect star has dimmed over the past year or so, but he had a strong showing in the AFL. There was some talk that he was playing through injuries last season as well. So maybe a post-hype name in very deep leagues, and let's see what Colson Montgomery can do early on in the season. The Blue Jays have joined the deferment party. Anthony Santander's $92.5 million deal with the Blue Jays includes nearly $62 million of that deferred. So the present day value, according to the union's calculation, is $68.6 million with an AAV of $13.7 million. Xavier Edwards said earlier this month that his right shoulder is the best it's felt in years since he began a new throwing program this offseason. Lucas Giolito has thrown 4 bullpen sessions this winter and expects to be a full go when spring training begins next month. Just give me a yes or no. In leagues that have IL spots, are you interested in Giolito as a late round stash?
Totally depends what he looks like in spring training. Like tentatively, yes.
Not a yes or no.
Theoretically, yes.
It's been so long since he's been good that I lean no on that. But it changed my mind.
There was a little bit of excitement around Lucas Giolito this time last year, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't remember what
For
the
some
drive
people,
line or something. There was some.
He made a lot of changes to all of his pitches.
But
I did not share in the enthusiasm.
Yeah,
changed the grip on his slider and changeup, I think.
Yeah.
So the Cubs also signed John Birdie to a 1-year, $2 million deal. He offers Nico Horner insurance and could battle Matt Shaw for third base during spring training. Let's get back into the outfield tiers. We've got a couple minutes left. The fallback options includes Jurickson Profar, Stephen Kwan, Tyler O'Neill, Pete Crow Armstrong, Jason Dominguez, Cedric Mullins, and Adolis Garcia. Things to know about this tier. Profar just signed with the Braves. I wrote here free agent because I actually created the rundown before he signed with the Atlanta Braves. And then Tyler O'Neill signed with the Orioles this offseason. The ADP range for this tier is rounds 12 through 18 with Stephen Kwan on the high end and Cedric Mullins down at the bottom. Scott, ideally, the names in this tier, you're looking at them as your outfielder 3, your outfielder 4. What do you think?
I would say 4. I would say unless you went light in the outfield, and that's not going to be me this year. But if you happen to go light in the outfield, you may have to target one of these guys as your third option. I think in a points league, Profar and Kwan could be fine for that. Obviously, Profar has the sustainability concerns, and Kwan has had a pretty up and down career, so he doesn't feel totally secure either. But their skill set is better tailored for points leagues.
Yeah, I kind of feel like maybe Kwan should be 1 tier higher in a points league, Scott. 3.1 fantasy points per game last year, better than Jazz Chisholm, Cody Bellinger, and Teoscar Hernandez.
Well, if I did that, I'd be putting him on equal footing with like Teoscar Hernandez, and
He averaged more fantasy points than him.
Boom.
Well, that's true, though he had a ridiculous first half and a pretty horrible second half. So
Not in a categories league, but only in
yeah.
Can I
you can do that if you want, but I'm not there.
Can I suggest a different name for this group? I know you like to keep them similar across positions, but this is like the category specialist tier, right? With the exception of like Profar and maybe Adolis Garcia, just because Adolis Garcia might just be bad at everything now. These are all like, well, I need batting average, I'll go get Stephen Kwan. I need power, I'll go get Tyler O'Neill. I need speed, I'll go get Pete Armstrong or Cedric Mullins. Jason Dominguez could be
like a 2020 guy.
Could be, but
he is kind of
last year was pretty rough. The minor league track record isn't as good as the hype would suggest. So
I've read some stuff that he could get a chance to lead off. I don't know.
There's minor league track record is pretty good, especially when you account for the massive steals totals.
It's good, but like I think it's one of those situations where it's just the hype has been so unreasonable for Jason Dominguez for so long that like it's an 816 OPS through his minor league career. His 53 games at AAA, 886, really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been better as he's climbed the ladder.
Well, AA was pretty rough.
Yeah,
didn't hit for much power there.
Definitely had some ups and downs in his career.
Yeah.
Like, signed when he was 16 years old. He was dubbed the Martian for out of this world tools and all that stuff. But it's been up and down. It's there were
hits a lot of balls on the ground.
Career, I know people were kind of dropping him in the prospect rankings and stuff, and then he picked things back up. But he should have a starting job. I think he's got free reign. I think Dominguez is going to play every day, assuming he doesn't fall flat on his face. And Scott, I was going to ask, Pete Crow Armstrong and Dominguez. I mean, these are two names that have obviously big prospect hype. Why are they 1 tier lower than someone like Dylan Cruz? Because at some point they were kind of on par with him in terms of prospect status.
I never put Pete Crow Armstrong in that same category because so much of his prospect profile is the very, very high defensive grade, which doesn't matter so much to us in fantasy. Obviously, he put a good foot forward offensively last year, and gave me hope that he can be a quality fantasy contributor. But I don't think the upside is on the same level as Dylan Cruz. I don't think the downside is on the same level of Dylan Cruz either, meaning Cruz has the higher floor and ceiling.
And did we talk about this on yesterday's pod? PCA unlikely to hit leadoff for the Cubs.
I saw that report. I didn't have it.
Craig Counsell. No, it wasn't a report. Craig Counsell said, like, we think he can get there eventually, but it's probably a no on Pete Crow Armstrong hitting at the top of the lineup to start the season, which doesn't mean he can't get there, but he had a 286 OBP last year. So
was he batting there last year?
No. He started to hit a little better.
Oh, okay. So
toward
some
the end of
people
last.
were hopeful.
Yeah.
Okay.
It never even crossed my
Yeah,
mind.
it didn't me either.
Yeah. I actually wrote him up as a bust in Bust 1.0 just because I think he's slightly overvalued. His
I don't love the
ADP
price. Yeah,
is in the 130s, and I think Tommy Edmonds going 50 picks later. I don't see a big difference between their expected skill sets.
So getting back to the question, it was pretty easy for me to put Pete Crow Armstrong a tier lower than Dylan Cruz. Jason Dominguez is a harder one. I just think I don't know. Chris presented the opposite case, but I feel like there's more enthusiasm for Cruz than Dominguez, given that Dominguez thudded pretty hard last year, and Cruz was not as good as we hoped he'd be, but he ran so much that he was still very useful.
And Dominguez, his sprint speed was really low. It was 64th percentile last year, and it was inconsistent playing time, and who knows what that means. But I think it was a much more discouraging 30 or so games for 18 games, I guess, for Dominguez than Cruz, I think, was 32.
I think they profile similarly, and I could see making that change, more likely moving Dominguez up than moving Cruz down, depending on how things look in spring training, etc. But there's also the question of, like, if Dominguez doesn't hit the ground running, the Yankees are going to do something about that. And the Nationals will probably give Cruz a very long leash because they're ready for him to break through and be a part of their future plans.
Yeah, I hear that, Scott. I just don't know if the Yankees have the necessary.
If they don't have anything. Yeah.
Who can they go to if Dominguez is bad? That's, I guess,
true.
A counterpoint. But, they could make a trade or something. We'll see.
Yeah.
The last resorts tier includes 27 names. All right, this time I'm not reading 27 names, but if you're following along, all of these tiers are live on the site. You could pull up the app and the article, and you could read along and see all the names that are in this tier. I will mention, the happenings within this tier. Edman signed an extension. Tommy Edman signed an extension with the Dodgers this offseason. Conforto signed a 1-year deal with the Dodgers. Josh Lowe and the Rays are playing their home games in George Steinbrenner Field this upcoming season. That has the same dimensions as Yankee Stadium. And obviously they're playing in the heat and humidity of Tampa Bay. I think this tier, Scott, you really start to show the cracks in the outfield position. There are definitely some intriguing names here, but also lots of platoon possibilities, some playing time risks. Do the Guardians even like Lane Thomas? Elliot Ramos destroyed lefties last year. He was actually really bad against right-handed pitching. Kerry Carpenter, Conforto, Josh Lowe, Burleson, Nolan Jones, Matt Wallner, Willie Abreu, they could all be strong side platoons. So I get the intrigue with some of these names, but I really don't want them as anything more than ideally my outfielder 5. 5 or later. I really don't want these guys to be my 4 or higher, basically.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would hope to have just one in a 5 outfielder league. If that, I would hope to have my outfield more or less filled by the time we get to this tier. That's why they're called the last resorts, and that's why the previous tier is called the fallback options. I think it kind of sums up where we're at the outfield position. There's a
lot of dudes in here though that I like.
Okay, go ahead.
There are some interesting ones as well, but go ahead, Chris.
I mean, I don't really like Taylor Ward, but he was like a top 20 outfielder last year.
He is reliably
fine.
Not
Boring's his way to production.
I'm with Gurriel, same thing.
I'm with Frank on Tommy Edman. I think he's way undervalued. I know Scott hates Tommy Edman and everything he stands for. Cedar Rafaela is toolsy and found ways to be productive in a way that could make him undervalued. Evan Carter was a top 120 pick this time last year, and I know he was bad, but the sample size wasn't huge, so I'll still make that late round pick, and he's like outside the top 200 in ADP. Jordan Walker is reportedly going back to the swing that he used as a prospect after trying to make some changes last year, so still believe there's some upside there.
Oh, yeah.
What if Victor Robles is just Jurickson Profar? Like the top prospect who just took a long time, needed a change of scenery to figure it out, but he was really good when he got to Seattle last year in ways that actually looked sort of maybe sustainable. His expected WOBA with the Seattle Mariners was like 337, which is not great, but for a guy who might steal 45 bases if he plays the whole season is really quite good.
There's basically no power there, right? So it's just steal specialist.
He hit 4 homers in 77 games, so it's like maybe you could see a path to 10 to 12, and that's not nothing.
I'm not denying there's upside here. There's lots of upside cases. Did you say Nolan Jones?
What if we were just a year late on Nolan Jones?
Nolan Jones, Josh Lowe were both borderline studs at this time a year ago. That's how we regarded them. It's just the upside that's there. All the guys you mentioned, Evan Carter, Jordan Walker. like they could be just wasted picks completely. And particularly in a deep roto league, the 5 outfielder league, the kind of league where we're going this deep into the outfield rankings, you can't so much afford a total miss there. You need something out of that spot.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I also, we didn't mention the Tigers guys, but Kerry Carpenter and Parker Meadows were really awesome the final 2 months of last season.
I haven't
like legitimate must-start players.
I haven't started writing sleepers 1.0.
Maybe not in head-to-head points.
In the deep leagues, Kerry Carpenter's a must-start player, but I actually have him as a bust this year because he's not going to play against left-handers. He's basically a glorified Jock Peterson, and he's being drafted well ahead of Jock Peterson. Jock Peterson isn't outfield eligible, but when Jock Peterson was outfield eligible, he was not getting nearly the traction Kerry Carpenter is right now.
Well, my next question was going to be, do you like Michael Conforto, Scott? Because that would be a little contradictory, but they're going 100 picks apart right now. Conforto and Kerry Carpenter, that is.
You don't think Conforto is going to play against left-handers?
No, I don't.
I think I saw that they said
I could be wrong about
left-handers.
I could be wrong about that.
I could be remembering incorrectly, but
he's fine against lefties.
Maybe he does.
Yeah,
I just assumed if their lineup configuration was the one that had Edman in center field, that Andy Pages would be the short side platoon for Conforto. But maybe Pages just starts. But I don't know.
Pages is minor league options, right? I'd be surprised if they let him just play a small role on the bench. If he doesn't have a starting job, I'm guessing he's back in the minors.
Yeah. 2 other names I wanted to mention here. Nick Castellanos, boring. I get it. Got off to a slow start last year. From May 29th on, he hit 284 with 17 home runs, 5 steals, and an 833 OPS.
Was basically Nick Castellanos for the final 4 months of the season.
He's going to bat in the middle of a really good Phillies lineup. And you mentioned Josh Lowe, Scott. I'm writing him up in Sleepers 1.0 because I think we're going too far the other way now. I'm giving him a pass for last season. I mean, he suffered an oblique injury right before the year. He was never right. He went on the IL twice with that oblique injury. Now he's playing his home games in Yankee Stadium South, where there's the short porch in right field, and everyone will point to, okay, the Rays are going to platoon him. They might. Look at their roster resource page, though. Who are they platooning him with? Like, they don't really have right-handed bats on the bench. They have Eloy Jimenez. He's not playing the outfield.
Who's that guy? Johnny DeLuca.
They've never shown
DeLuca's going to start in center field.
They've never shown any willingness. They've never shown any willingness to play Josh Lowe against lefties, really.
I understand that, but even if he's just a platoon player, he was like a top 50 player.
I will just say, I wish we were writing him off more because I could get on.
What, 160-ish?
Yeah, I could get on board if it was like Evan Carter, who's going outside of the top 200. But like,
it's funny. I see them kind of in the same light. Nolan Jones too. Josh Lowe, Evan Carter.
Right.
Nolan
I
Jones.
agree.
Their upside isn't any less than it was at this time a year ago. And yet I have no confidence in them. So I see where I rank them and I like, man, they need to be higher. But at the same time, I'm not drafting them where they currently are.
Well, here's the thing.
It's situational, I guess.
No, but in January, Josh Lowe is 165 or 167. Nolan Jones is 253. Okay. Evan Carter's 270.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean, where it's like, I totally get the upside case for Josh Lowe, but we just saw a miserable downside case for him for a guy who has only had one good season as a platoon bat.
I just think he was hurt, man. I think he's a talented player. And on top of that, the ballpark that he's going to play in?
Yeah, it'll help.
Maybe.
I like it. I like it.
Maybe.
Again, I could see it, but it's 167th versus 270.
You know, here's the thing. As bad as Josh Lowe was last year, he had 10 homers and 25 steals. So in a deep roto league, that was still, it's still
useful-ish. Yeah.
So he probably has the highest floor of that trio, and maybe that's why he's going 80 to 100 picks earlier than the other two.
Yep. All right. The leftovers tier has 24 names in it. Not going to read them off. Things to point out here. Jock Peterson signed with the Rangers, and he's util only. He's almost certainly not going to earn outfield eligibility. Alex Verdugo remains a free agent, and Max Kepler signed a 1-year deal with the Phillies. I will also mention Roman Anthony is in this tier. He is the Red Sox top prospect and should be up at some point this season. Heston Kjerstad, post-hype option, but I just don't see a clear opportunity for playing time with Baltimore right now. Just give me names, no analysis because we've got to wrap up. But anybody else in this leftovers tier that you just want to mention their name?
I just want to squeeze him.
JJ Bleday.
He was good.
Like, why can't he hit 25 homers in a better park? You know,
Andy Pajas, if he gets playing time assurances, he'll move up.
I'm kind of interested to see what Jung Hoo Lee can do.
Yeah.
If he's healthy in a full season, you know?
Yeah. Trevor Larnach, I really like the profile. I really like all the red on the StatCast page. It hasn't really translated to production, but it seems like it should. And also there's platoon concerns there.
Max Kepler, lineup and park upgrade.
Yeah.
Might be a platoon bat, but I could see him being pretty useful in a deeper league.
If Andy Pajas does start in center field for the Dodgers, even if he's batting in the bottom of that lineup, I think he has 25 home run upside. So, all right.
Yeah.
Those are a few names there. Again, you can check out all of Scott's outfield tiers on the site, but we are going to wrap there. For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, and we will be back again next week. Bye-bye.